Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details. Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I am your host of Yoga Birth Babies, and welcome back to our second part of our two-part series for Mother's Day. So we have over 200 episodes of Yoga Birth Babies, so we wanted to do something special for you as a mother or mother figure. We know that this path into parenthood, whether it be your first or second or third or fourth or fifth, is often a challenge for many of us. So we wanted to pull from our favorite episodes something that can add and support to you as we approach Mother's Day, a day to honor all the work you do as a parent. So we pulled from some of our favorite episodes, and for this episode, we have The Ultimate Guide to Sex After Baby with Deborah Pascali-Bonero. We have Shame-Proof Parenting with Mercedes Zamudio, The Importance of Postpartum Education with Dr. Jane Shamoff, How to Overcome Mom Guilt, Martyrdom, and Perfection with Dr. Pooja Lakshmi, and The Fifth Trimester with Lauren Smith Brody. So I'm not going to go through all of their bios because if I did that, we'd be here for another 10 or 15 minutes just hearing me read their bios. So it's all in the show notes. So if you want to get to know each of the speakers a little bit more, please check them out. They are all very impressive people with a lot to share and a lot to learn even more from them. So I'm really excited for you to hear that. I also want to remind you that we're talking about Mother's Day and taking care of yourself. So of course, I'm a little biased, but as a yoga teacher, someone that's dedicated my life to yoga, not just being for the body, but for the mind, I call yoga my mental vacation when I'm on the mat. It's as if everything, all my to-do list can just take a break and I can attend to myself. So I know that you don't always have time for a full class. Hopefully I'll see you on the mat for a full class. But if you don't have time for a class, head over to our website, prenatalyogacenter.com, and download our 5 simple solutions to the most common pregnancy pains. So taking care of yourself is really important because if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to have anything left for those that you need to care for. So grab that guide. Use it as you need. Take care of your aches and pains. Now, maybe you're able to grab some time in your day to take a class. I hope so. And if so, I look forward to seeing you on the mat. We have live stream classes 7 days a week. We also have re-releases. So I know that our schedule doesn't always fit your schedule. So you can always do a re-release class that you have it when you need it for over 24 hours. I think altogether it's about 36 hours that you can have that particular class. And it's fresh from that day. So you get something new each time. And then we also have workshops in person, online, and on demand. In fact, we are continuously building our on-demand library. Again, everyone has their own schedule. We want to be able to support that. So we just added 2 new workshops to our on-demand library. Check that out. We now have 4 one-hour classes in Spanish. That is thanks to our wonderful teacher, Kathy Harris, who provided that. that. And we'll be doing a postpartum in Spanish. We just put a VBAC workshop out. The on-demand is growing, and it is so, so exciting. So take a look at that again on our website, prenatalYogaCenter.com. And then the last thing I want to bring up is our teacher training. So I know some of you out there are also yoga teachers, and this whole perinatal community is really exciting to you. And if that's something you want to dive deeper into, check out our teacher training. It is in depth. It is fun. It is enriching. I'm incredibly proud of it. You can check that out on our website, also prenatalYogaCenter.com, for our prenatal teacher training or our postnatal teacher training that's offered once a year during the summer. Okay, enough of me. Let's take a super quick break. When we come back, please enjoy my conversation with these amazing guests.
Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower than low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
This whole motherhood thing and sexuality. So I don't know.
Yes.
So okay, let's go there, because I was laughing as I was reading this, because a couple weeks ago was Mother's Day. So I was watching at night, my husband and I were watching a Saturday Night Live rerun of just like the motherhood one. And
Yes.
maybe you've seen this commercial. They have it. It's a Saturday Night Live commercial, the mom jeans, where
Yes.
So as I was reading your book, I'm like, oh my God, I had just seen it a few weeks ago. So those that don't know, take a pause from this podcast, go look it up, the mom jeans, where they're like, where mothers lose all their sexuality. Like there's this thing that, and there's so much truth to it, like motherhood, maybe it's the whole virgin mother, I don't know, but there's this whole disconnect between motherhood and sexuality when you wouldn't be a mother without something in sexual. So can you, and you talk about it in your book, which is great. Why do you think people put sexuality and motherhood into very different realms? Why can't we have a sexy mama?
Yeah. And I mean, hopefully it's changing some. And I give some credit to, especially since we're influenced by media, not only the comedy of Saturday Night Live doing that to say how ridiculous it is, but also the celebrities that are speaking out. Beyonce saying after she had a baby, like, I'm sexy, and she did a whole sexy mama thing. But I think that society for the last 500 years, we've really been in a more patriarchal model. And I'm not saying that as gender, but as philosophy, and different religions and cultures have really kind of almost gave us beliefs. The fact that we didn't have good sex education in school, or that our parents didn't talk about it. There was this kind of shame around sexuality in many ways, and then especially about motherhood and sex, kind of the Madonna whore thing, that once you're a mother, you're no longer sexy. Even television, if you're young and single, you can be sexy, but you're a mother now. You have to change that perception. And I really feel that's something that every person listening, I hope every person that reads our book, unpacks where that comes from for them. Really looks at what is your belief around motherhood and sexuality, where does it come from, and if what you desire of what you'd like for sexuality for yourself as a parent is not there, then what are 3 action steps that you can take to get there? Because I think it's loaded for all of us in all different ways.
What do you think there are some steps? Like just step back and think, how can I still be sexy and a mother? What are some, I love that you said 3 action steps. Can you give some examples of what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's just first to give voice that you even have a barrier. Like some people haven't really talked about it, or never said it out loud, or never wrote it down if you're journaling along with this. But the first action step is to identify what is your belief about motherhood and sexuality. And if you feel that there's been any shame or stifling around it, just name it. Where did it come from? And that the second I would really say is to put an action step of what do you want to do about it? What would you like to do to feel that you're a sexy mama? And we all define that differently. What does that mean? And the third is really communicate, especially if you're in a relationship with a partner. I think that's where communication comes in, because I find sometimes one partner is clearly seeing you as absolutely sexy. I've been really blown away, especially in a lot of the exercises we're doing in our online class, where the person that's given birth will write how they're feeling about their body or they're feeling about their sexuality. And then we ask the other partner to write about how they feel about your body and how they feel about sexuality. And they're completely opposite. And like, the woman had no clue that her partner was still seeing her as sexy, that the disconnect was her own. Like, where does that disconnect come from? And sometimes it's the other way. I mean, I'm honest in my book that part of what really was an issue for me in my first marriage was that my partner was the one that had the more long-standing belief that you're a mother and sexuality didn't quite go together in the same way anymore. And we didn't take the time to unpack that and communicate about it and look at it and heal it.
I'm going to jump to some of my notes further down because you totally hit something. You talked about also kind of that postpartum body, that the person that gave birth, maybe they don't feel sexy, but their partner still sees them. So can we, first of all, I really appreciated that chapter about the new body chapter. And I'm going to admit that it took me a while. I'm still not 100% there to really appreciate and my son is 8, my daughter's 6. So we're still on a journey. Still on a journey. So can you talk about that and how to appreciate your postpartum body?
Yeah, this is such an issue, right? Is that one, we don't talk about it when we're pregnant. I don't know about you, but I remember thinking like I was so focused on giving birth that no one talked to me about what my body was going to look like. And I was pretty shocked after my first, I couldn't believe what my body looked like. And so I think we need to normalize bodies. We need to see postpartum bodies. We shouldn't be hiding them so that all women, all people know kind of this journey. But the second thing that I find in so many people is we're trying to get back to something. And like when you're trying to get back, that means you're not appreciating where you are. And so many people are like, well, I'm going to eventually get back that body. But I want to just say to you, like, you're never going to get back that body. Your body has changed because you gave birth.
Because you created a person or multiple people. Like what my midwife said, she's like, the landscape of your pelvis is forever changed. I'm like, that is so true.
Isn't it? And like, I remember looking down and going, where did these stretch marks come from? Like, I truly hadn't seen them at the end of pregnancy. And like, those are the roadmaps to motherhood for me. Like, I wear them proudly on my body now with pride that my body gave birth rather than shame that I have these stretch marks. They're no longer, of course, red, but they're little fine silver lines. And so I think that we have to look at that you're not going to go back, but how can we accept where we are? And as you know in the book, I have people write love letters and to their bodies to look in the mirror and say, I love you. And I think the most incredible has been to have partners either tell or write their love letter about what they love about your body. And can I tell you, in our circles, when we're in our class together, the tears we all have when people have permission to share what their partners said or wrote is incredible. And I think we don't realize that, right? Like, we're judging our own body and we're not even realizing that our partners are not near as critical and usually loving that body. And that will help us also really love our body, because it's essential. If you feel shame and you don't feel comfortable in your body, it's impacting your sexuality.
So I definitely think we should start with a definition of shame, because I think maybe as we talk about shame-proof parenting and the shame that, parents have in general, let's make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah. And so shame to me especially in the context of shame-proof parenting, is anything that makes you feel less than, any experience, any phrase, any word, any person, that makes you feel like because of that experience, I am now less than, I am no good. That's what shame is to me.
Yeah. And I can tell definitely as a parent, there's been moments where I'm like, oh, what am I doing? I'm not doing this right. I feel less than on many occasions. So how do you see that shame infiltrates parenthood? And that's kind of a big question.
Yeah. And I think I'll take it from, the book's approach, which is it infiltrates in the ways we begin to respond to ourselves and our children. So I'll take kind of your, that broad example of there are many times when parents feel ashamed, right? What do we do with it, right? So we're in Target and our kid's having a hard time and they fall over in the floor and maybe knock over something, right? That's embarrassment initially, right?
Right.
But what do we tell ourselves about why our kid did it, why we allowed it to happen, what everyone else is thinking really begins to form into shame. And it may, depending on how similar experiences have been for you or other people in your life, or even just with you and your child, that shame will be the foremost responding emotion as opposed to empathy or compassion or even understanding. And so I think oftentimes when we have all of these narratives that say you have to be a good parent, your kids have to always be a reflection of you, you can't mess up, they can't mess up, something as innocuous as my kid having a hard time and knocking something over in the store becomes about how horrible I am as a parent and how horrible my family is. And that's why I respond the way I might to my child.
Yeah, so it becomes a story of judgment, of feeling that internal self-judgment. I also, just side note, love that you picked Target because that is our spot. That as soon as if we're going to go, we're like, all right, is everything okay? Because there's bound to be some sort of confrontation at Target. So
yes.
I don't know if that's just across the board, but Target.
It is. And I'll tell you why. Target is, and I've told many parents this, places like that are cesspools of overstimulation for the parent and the child. You're overstimulated by your to-do list, but also Target is actually designed to overstimulate your wanting to spend money. And so you by yourself going to Target, by yourself, you get overstimulated. You have to kind of focus in so you can do what you need to do. Think about a kid who doesn't even have the skill to focus in and do what they need to do.
Right.
Put both of you guys together in a store like that, it's bound to be a lot of stuff going on.
All right. Well, that actually helps me feel a little better because it always is like, okay, brace yourself. Has everyone eaten? Is the blood sugar good? Everyone's happy. We're going to Target. Yep. It's definitely one of those, but that actually helps. So how would you talk about the three, you lay it out nicely, the three aspects of shame to consider. Can you explain those?
Yeah, I'll go into kind of this idea that I think they encompass. And this is that idea that understanding how your shame really actually shows up for you is going to be your best bet in trying to shame-proof your parenting. And so when you think about that, you're thinking about, okay, what's my story, right? What's my narrative? And I even sometimes have parents pare it down to the incident. A really good example is I was working with a parent who told me, I know I'm not supposed to spank, but my first instinct when my child disrespects me is to give them a pop on their hand. And I began to say, can you tell me a story about that? Any story that comes to mind, I just want you to tell me about it. And she said, oh, I have a great one. When me and my mom, and she goes into this really heartbreaking story of how her mom took her to something where she was supposed to get something like a dress or something, but they couldn't quite find the exact thing. And she wasn't a baby anymore. She was like 15 or 16. And she kind of started to get a little frustrated. She started stumping her feet and kind of being a little brat, if you will, for lack of a better term. And her mom said, hold out your hand. And she did, really apprehensively. And her mom slapped her in the hand and said, never disrespect me like that again in the store.
So we're living our past.
Yep. So, and I should have said, I'll do this. I should have said trigger warning. Sorry. That is kind of a big story. But I think it really encompasses the idea that a lot of times we don't know where we first picked up our associations with things like disrespect or chaos or overwhelm. But it's one of the reasons why I love talking about people's narratives, right? Which is the best way to bring out our shame, because it's like, when is the first time you remember this? Or when sometimes you remember that? Or I don't even like to make people go back some places. I'll just say, tell me a story about it, right? About this particular thing. And you'd be surprised what people come up with. And I think when we think about that, our stories, our narratives, our past, it really becomes, oh, this is where I first thought this was something bad, and this is something that made me a bad person.
Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower than low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
I firmly believe that if more people know what to potentially expect in their postpartum period, then less postpartum mood disorders would exist. Because often we go through the process, we see our doulas or our specialists or our midwives throughout the pregnancy, and then, we have the baby, and then we're kind of like left to figure it out. There are a lot of doulas now that are coming and helping postpartum, which is absolutely incredible. But overall, in our society, that's not happening. They're like, okay, see you in 4 to 6 weeks, right? And it's that 4 to 6 week period where it's really a breeding ground for mood disorders. But I like to think about it as if, let's say you go to your doctor because you have like an ear infection or a bladder infection or something, and your doctor's like, okay, I'm going to prescribe you this antibiotic. Now, when you're taking the antibiotic, there may be some side effects. If you experience stomach cramping, if you have difficulty sleeping, if you, have a stronger appetite, those are all normal. Don't worry about them. They're just part of taking this antibiotic. So what if along that same vein, somebody would go through the process with you, and this is where postpartum planning comes in, and says like, okay, so you're about to have this baby. So let's go into possible things that you can expect that are normal, but you may feel in your postpartum journey. Talking about emotions, talking about physically. And so we're expecting to feel only happy emotions. We're expecting to feel so much bonding and joy and this and that. Breastfeeding is supposed to go swimmingly and easily and come naturally. And so when we have those expectations and then the reality hits that it's not that way, that can be really challenging. And again, that can be the seed that's planted for postpartum mood disorder. But if you know that you probably will experience some sort of sad feelings, depression, grieving your past life, having scary thoughts, like walking up the stairs and having a scary thought that you might drop your baby. That's normal. That's you protecting your baby and holding your baby tighter as you're walking up the stairs. It's actually like an evolutionary mama bear instinct. Mm-hmm. And so when you know that these types of thoughts and feelings exist postpartum but are still completely within normal range, rather than add fuel to the fire, you're going to put the fire out because you're going to be like, oh, I know this is normal, right?
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because I feel like when we hear about postpartum planning, a lot of it is, okay, I'm going to take a lactation prep class. I'm going to take my newborn care. So I do know how to swaddle and put their clothes on and bathe them and, all that stuff. But the education, just as we do a lot of childbirth education of these are your choices and these are your values and this is the landscape of birth and interventions, then looking at the landscape and education of postpartum, these are some of the feelings you may have. Here's some of the things that a lot of people feel, that lack of control, that missing their former life, the fear of like, am I going to drop my baby? All these things we're taught are normal so that we don't have to question ourselves of like, is this normal? So if I'm understanding it correctly, if we have that education, it can take some of the pressure off guessing if we're normal and then maybe give us the information of, oh, I didn't hear about this obsession to check the baby every hour or getting every drop out of the bottle. That I didn't hear about that. So maybe I should check in with my care provider or my midwife or my doula and see maybe I need some help. Is that how I'm understanding it? Because it sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. It's just basically...
It's postpartum education.
And when we have a negative... So postpartum education, I love that you mentioned that because it's... When we think about it, we think of like how to take care of the baby.
Right.
Right. But the postpartum education that I think is even more important is how to take care of yourself. Because you're not going to be able to take care of the baby if you're not doing well. And when we're pregnant, we're doing everything to nurture ourselves and nurture our bodies because we're growing this baby. And suddenly when we're not pregnant anymore, we become last priority. Suddenly we're not nurturing our body and taking care of our body because the baby's out. And now all of our focus is on the baby.
Right.
And so how could that not lead to negative thoughts and feelings? And different moods. And also we have so many hormonal things going on that also triggers us to be more heightened emotions. And so when we're planning for postpartum, I really like myself and my specialist, we really focus on the emotional component because that's what really drives a lot of, these mood disorders. And so if the emotional component is discussed and we understand what's normal, what's within normal range, and I actually have a postpartum planning guide on my website that's absolutely free to download that kind of goes into all of that. And it has like a worksheet component as well where you can indicate there, certain ways that your partner or anybody that's able to help you can help, as well as different feelings and thoughts and all that good stuff that you may experience postpartum.
Is there a time frame to keep in mind for PMATs? Like where does it get fuzzy of, I just had my baby, my hormones are all over the place, that estrogen crashes and the thyroid can be kind of out of whack and people can have that. I'm just trying to get my feet on the ground. Where does it then cross over to my hormones should be rebalancing or they're not, and I'm still having all this anxiety or depression or OCD? Is there a kind of a definitive timeline or not really?
There is. And initially, I'm sure you've heard of the baby blues, right? So the baby blues is kind of like a precursor. Traditionally it's been a precursor to postpartum depression, but I think it's a precursor to any of these postpartum mood disorders. But it's more like focuses more on depression. But the baby blues is kind of that transitionary time where your hormones are out of whack. Everything is kind of up in the air and you're kind of figuring out how to get your feet on the ground, right?
And that's like what, the first 6 weeks, first 12 weeks?
Yeah. I believe it's the first 6 weeks.
Okay.
Don't quote me. But I believe it's the first 6 weeks or so. But I think it can last like a good up to 3 months without necessarily being really diagnosable. Like technically, according to the DSM, I think you can diagnose it after 6 weeks. But again, I need to double check that because I'm not looking at the particular guidelines right now. But I would say in my experience, I've seen it last up to 3 months. And it also depends on when you get help. That's the other big thing. So if, let's say, you start with the baby blues and you didn't get any extra support, you weren't able to really process how you were feeling during that time period, you get to the 3 month mark, you're feeling the same or worse, you may just still need that like booster, that little like boost of support to still be totally fine and not have it be long lasting. I've even had women who have approached me 9 months postpartum, a year postpartum, where they just haven't had anybody to process these feelings with. And they've just been thinking they're crazy this whole time.
That must be so hard on them.
It's so hard. And again, like, women and birthing people are just so incredible that we're supposed to be, we feel like we need to be superheroes and do everything right. Mm-hmm. And that's not really the case, because we are just people and we make mistakes, and that's totally okay because it's all part of the learning experience. But when I talk to clients who are further in their postpartum journey, their journey back to mental health and mental wellness is longer because they've had more time to really grow those deep roots within, their mood disorders. And it's harder to come back from that, but you always can. But that's why we try to focus on prevention, because I believe if you know and if you're educated, then you feel more in control going into the postpartum period. So you're less likely to plant those seeds, so to speak.
I love that this always comes back to the postpartum planning. That's kind of struck a new fire with me. I've always talked about planning postpartum with my students, about make sure you have support, make sure you have, lactation consultant available, have your partner, if your partner, know the signs of PMADs. But I'm kind of struck by the idea that, again, we have the childbirth ed, but we don't really talk about what the landscape of parenthood can look like. I feel like it's two camps. You kind of alluded to this earlier. It's either the camp of everything's great, look how happy and shiny and smiley I am, or the other camp of everything sucks, being a parent sucks. Like and there are kind of these two cartoons on the either end. Yeah. But I don't feel like there's a realistic landscape planted of, here are some of the normal ups and downs. Here's what physiologically you might be feeling. Here's what emotionally you might be feeling. I feel like we need to plant those seeds of reality check-ins. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to partner with OBGYNs, hospitals, pediatricians, to help with the prevention piece, because I think that is really the key to changing the landscape of maternal mental health care in the United States.
Yeah, getting a real perspective of what this, and education, because I do think, in social media, and I am definitely on social media probably more than I should be, but really plays up the two sides of shiny, happy people and miserable, sad parenthood sucks. And I feel like that then it's just an unrealistic expectation or portrayal of parenthood.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you reminded me of something. The two sides that you were mentioning, it's like when you are pregnant, you don't want to look at the like, oh my God, it's so dark and depressing side. Right. So you try to focus on the like matchy, happy, posed like side. Cause you're like, I'm doing everything I need to do. I'm good. This is what I'm going to be. I'm going to channel this. Right. So you're not even focusing on the others, on the tougher side of parenthood. And so I think because of that also, you may not know, or you may be really shocked by how emotionally trying the transition is. And on our social media, we really try to find that like happy Switzerlandy place. I just made Switzerland an adverb, but I'll take it. But that's what we really try to do, because, postpartum is beautiful, but it is challenging, and it is emotional.
It's messy and beautiful.
It is a hot mess. It is a hot mess, but there's so much to it. There's so much happening. There's so much growth, and growth is messy. It really is. And oftentimes women feel like they've lost themselves, right? I'm sure you've heard that a lot. And the reality is you don't really lose yourself. You just have to find a way to integrate this kind of new role into who you already are. you're just now a deeper version of yourself, a more evolved version of yourself, which is a really beautiful place to be if you let yourself be there. If you kind of, another analogy I really like to use, or metaphor, is when you're kind of caught in a riptide and you're fighting really hard against it to try to get out because you're so scared and you're so uncomfortable. But when you just allow yourself to ride that wave and you just, then you suddenly come ashore and you're okay. And there's a peace in that.
So it's like embracing the messiness.
Yes. Just kind of letting go of trying to control everything and embracing the chaos and messiness that is, early postpartum, and understanding that it's going to change. People are like, how am I ever going to be okay? But the reality is, and I'm sure you've gone through this too, is that in the beginning, you don't understand how this is going to work. But after some time, you don't understand how you ever had life without, your child or your children. Like, you can't even imagine things being how they were before. You don't even necessarily miss that anymore. In the beginning, you do. Just last week I was having a lovely brunch with my husband in like a nice restaurant, and now I'm like covered in poop and puke and breast milk. Right?
Can I circle back to the messiness? Because living in New York City, I work, and I am definitely a type A personality. How would you advise people to embrace the messiness of postpartum when they're used to control and order?
Isn't that the question of the century?
All right, true. Yes, okay, I get that.
It's so true. Like, how do we do that? How do we do that? That is really, what we all want to know.
I guess it's like your surfing analogy. You're riding the wave. You have to trust it's going to bring you ashore.
But it's so scary to do that. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because if you're somebody, because I'm also, pretty type A, I'm not going to lie. And for me to let go of control and just be is really hard. That's scary. That's like a free fall.
Yeah.
However, I think you find that the more you try to control, the more anxiety and, suffocating, like your situation is so intense and challenging it is. And even if letting go of control comes in phases, like you don't have to just like completely free fall. I remember with my son, to kind of talk a little bit about my personal experience, when I first had him, and I was so obsessed with like nobody could touch him. You have to do this, sanitizer, blah, blah, blah. I was like really ahead of my time with all the sanitizer 10 years ago. I came to a point where I realized that it was really doing me a disservice, and I was like hurting people's feelings unintentionally. And I had to tell myself that I need to look at my baby, because even at 3 months old, even at 2 months old, even as a newborn, when they are uncomfortable, they will let you know. So if my baby is being held by someone else, or if somebody's changing my baby's diaper in a different way than I would do it, or feeding them in a little bit different way than I would do it, look to your baby to tell you how they feel about that situation. Because ultimately, isn't what you're trying to do is be the best parent that you can be, right? You're just trying to do your best and keep your child comfortable and happy and taken care of. And your baby will tell you when they're not feeling that way.
Yeah, you're totally true.
Once I started looking at him, he was like a hot potato being passed around, and I was freaking out inside. But then I was like, okay, I'm just going to look at him. And he was totally happy. Like, okay, then it must be okay. Because that kind of takes it out of you. Right. Right? And because when it's in you, you're not sure. So when it takes it out of you and you're able to kind of observe from a different perspective, it can really help mitigate your anxiety and kind of start to be like the first stepping stone of relinquishing that control.
you define these three, the mom guilt, the martyr mode, and the perfectionism, as the triple threat. Can you break each one down a little bit to what you mean by them?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason that I define them as the triple threat is because, I see them in my patients all the time, even if you're not suffering from postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety. These three these three big issues are just everywhere. And so when I say mom guilt, what I'm talking about is that constant sense that you're doing something wrong. No matter what decision you make, you're always wondering and thinking that there could have been a way that I could have done this better. So I'll just give you an example that I like to share. So a couple years ago, I was co-facilitating a mom's group, and this was in DC, in Washington, DC, where I live and where I practice. And there was a mom there with her baby who was about, I think maybe a month old or something like that. And this was a woman who, worked at a high power law firm in DC, very well educated, professional. And she was like, my boss just told me that I can take an extra 2 weeks of maternity leave. And I just don't know what to do because I feel bad, leaving more work for my team. They're going to have to pick up more slack, and they've already had to do so much while I was away. But then if I don't take it, I feel bad because obviously I want to spend more time with my daughter, and I would feel horrible not giving that to her if I could. And I was just kind of like, is there any option here that doesn't make you feel horrible? And I think that framing the guilt issue in that way is just so helpful because it helps women see that this isn't me. It's not possible that in every single situation I'm making the wrong choice. Yeah. I like to think of guilt as sort of like a check engine light that's going off in our brains that has lost its meaning, and we can talk more about this. I think that the guilt piece, the mom guilt, it's coming from our culture. It's not coming from us. But that's how I think about mom guilt. And then when it comes to martyr mode, when I think about, and I wrote a piece for the Times on this right around Mother's Day this year about how moms don't need to be martyrs. When we think about a martyr is somebody who makes themselves so small, who hurts themselves in order to make other people feel better, who will sacrifice themselves for the sake of their children. And I mean, we see messages all the time of moms who are doing that and who are encouraged to do that right from the beginning, right? When we live in this culture that, kind of lionizes breastfeeding and exclusive breastfeeding, right? So there's just all of these ways where you're sort of taught that sacrificing your own happiness and your own well-being
and identity.
Exactly, is then going to lead to you being a better mom and your kids being better children. And I think that messaging is just so toxic. And then finally, we get to perfectionism. And especially for my moms that are, type A, high achievers, sort of linear, like to have a plan. One of the ways that I talk about this in my class is that, the experience of having a newborn is just a completely chaotic and disorganized system, right? And so you're trying to bring order to this chaos. And if you're somebody who's type A, you just want so badly to know that you're doing it right. You really, really want to know that you're a good mom. And so it's so common to then kind of overextend that and get into this perfectionistic thinking where everything becomes black and white. And again, nothing's good enough. You're kind of aiming for this elusive goal that doesn't actually exist. And in that process, you're discounting all the good that's actually there. So I think all of them are related, right? But so everybody kind of struggles more with one versus the other, I think.
So there was something else as I was writing up my questions for you, as I was thinking about the family structure. And this is something I've talked to a lot of my friends about. A lot of them feel like the burden drips down, and maybe this is back to the martyr mode, but drips down, they carry the family. What are ways, how do we restructure families so that the mother or the mother figure can feel less burden?
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's this concept that I'm sure you've heard about before called maternal gatekeeping.
Explain that.
Have you heard of this?
I have, but explain that.
Okay. Yeah. So maternal gatekeeping is essentially when a mom or whoever's the primary caretaker, ends up discouraging other would-be caretakers, from actually being able to participate in caretaking because they are having trouble kind of giving up control. And actually this is a place where anxiety can come in as well. It can be really hard to watch your partner make mistakes. And with maternal gatekeeping, I think it's really important that moms look at, like, what is the role that I play in this family system that's been set up. I'm not saying that it's all mom's fault, right? Like, look, we've talked about the fact that, like, this is the culture that's kind of reinforced this environment. But I do think that in a lot of places, moms can really look at, like, what role do I play in continuing this behavior pattern? So if you have a partner that is willing to help out and is trying to help out, but every time he changes a diaper, you're telling him he could be doing it differently, or every time he's like washing pump parts, you're rewashing them because he's not doing it right. Like, what incentive does he have to keep helping? The thing that he learns is like, well, I'm just not that good at this, or she wants it done a different way, so I'm not going to engage. And that's harmful because part of growing into your identity as a parent is actually making mistakes and figuring things out, right? It's like feeling this sense of mastery. So you need to give your partner, or if there's another caregiver in the house, you need to give them the full space to be in that role and be messy, and figure it out for themselves. The data shows that the more time, in heterosexual couples, the more time that a father is at home right after the baby's born, the more likely that child rearing responsibilities will be more equitable. So if there is an option to take paternity leave and to have both of you at home at the same time, I know a lot of times for financial reasons, people try and stagger it, but if it is at all possible to have an overlap, that can be really helpful because then he's kind of learning the same skill set that you are right in the beginning. But these are things I think that couples really have to work hard on to try and work through some of these behavioral patterns that come up.
And that's probably something also that can reflect in the relationship. I know when I was a doula, I would talk about dynamics while someone is in labor. So if somebody was the doer or the kind of people pleaser, then that person, especially if it's the person in labor, it's not going to fill that dynamic in the relationship. So if the relationship already is I'll say the mother person already is kind of the organizer and the doer, and that needs to be discussed beforehand because she may likely just take that role and that can be too overwhelming. So that could really back things up to what's the dynamic? How do they relate? How do they split responsibilities so that the mother doesn't keep loading more and more? Am I making any sense? It's just kind of working it through my brain.
Absolutely. And I often say, and so much of this comes back to the mental load, which I talk about in the course. Moms are the CEOs of the household, right? There's a great book. I'm sure you've probably heard of it. My friend Eve Rodsky wrote it. It's called Fair Play.
I don't know that book, but I will look it up.
It's an awesome book. It's actually a game that you play with your partner, and it's all about making household organization more equitable. She's a lawyer, and her background is in organizational management. And so it's interesting because we both come to this same type of work, except from different angles. So she's sort of like, we need to look at the family and the household
contract.
Right. We need a contract. Like, this should be run like a business, right? Like when you're responsible for the trash, that means that you also buy all of the trash bags. That means you take out the trash. That means you clean the trash can, right? Like, you do all things that have to do with the trash. So that's a great book and a great little exercise to read with a partner. It's great if you can kind of look at it even before you have kids, because it includes just really good prompts for some of these conversations to look at what are our patterns already, and so how can we look at trying to create some of these issues that are going to come up.
Because they're going to show up even more, because then we think postpartum, those first 12-ish weeks, years, who knows, everyone is tired. They're trying to figure it out. So they may not be showing up at their best. And so then they fall back to their habits, and then they fall back to their couple dynamics. But I love this idea of the contract, but if you've kind of figured things out a little bit beforehand, and this seems like it's just good for relationships in general, but you kind of figure out, okay, I know I'm going to be tired. Therefore I might be a little bit snippy. I might be a little short tempered. So let's try to negate that by understanding each other's roles and responsibilities. Oh, this sounds brilliant. I'm totally getting this book.
And I think it's just so important. And if you think about the amount of time that people spend on like researching what type of stroller to buy or what brand of breast pump to get, or like planning their baby shower. I guess baby showers aren't really a thing right now, but before the pandemic, right? It's like, what if we took some of this energy that was like focused on the logistics of having a baby and instead invested it into mom's mental health, or invested it into looking at how can we better handle the mental load in our family, and what are our relationship dynamics going to be in the postpartum period? I just think that there's actually so much that can be done from a prevention standpoint that is actually like pretty low hanging fruit. Like it's not like reinventing the wheel, but it's just taking the time to sit down and have some of these conversations.
Hey there. Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower than low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
So I like the chapter you talked about knowing when to ask for help. Can you explain what you discovered about this?
Oh my gosh, that it is, it's the answer to everything, and it's the thing that we have the hardest time with. I've kind of come to actually be able to there are these things that we sort of assume about ourselves that you don't realize are actually quite widespread. So, essentially, this is the first generation of American men who have been raised to believe they should participate 50-50 in the home. It is also the first generation of American women who have been raised to believe that the world is theirs and they have everything in front of them and they should be able to excel at it all. And social media certainly doesn't help with the image that we see of, we're only seeing the pretty stuff, right? So those two things fight against each other. And so you have, a lot of moms, particularly moms who are, in professional jobs, who have moved up the ladder or whatever, who feel like they have to be the best at everything. And with the way parental leave is set up, really not necessarily by our government, but just sort of in society-wide, we see that, the moms typically take a lot longer at home than the dads do. And so what that does is, even in the most well-intentioned couples, the most, modern men who want to jump, or partners who want to jump in and help, and, moms who kind of know that they want a 50-50 relationship, these moms are at home and they are doing everything and they want to be the best at it because they're the ones who are on the scene. And so they treat being a new mom like they would their job, and they take over. And then you end up with this, all these dads and partners who don't actually know what to do and don't know how to help and aren't the expert. And so then fast forward to when mom goes back to work, and you have these patterns that have been set up very, very early on of like, well, dad doesn't know how to bathe the baby. Dad doesn't know how to, put the onesie on without, like touching the soft spot or whatever it is. And it really impacts the trust that that women have of their partners. But the truth is, there is absolutely nothing that a partner can't do that you can, except for produce milk. Like, that is it, and even that, certainly dad can feed baby in a bottle. So that is one. And the dads that I interviewed and talked to, I did a whole separate dad partner survey, and they're aware that you need logistical help. They are not actually aware of specifically what you need. And they're not aware of emotionally that you even need their help emotionally. They're not even sure that they know how to satisfy that. So a lot of the mental health experts who I talked to said that they advise new moms who are having a difficult time to actually find the sentence, find the word to say to your partner. And this applies to also to your mom, also to your boss, whoever in your life you need support from, to find the words to ask for what you need emotionally. So, yes, you should feel very comfortable saying, like, logistically, like, hey babe, can you please pick up, our daughter at daycare on X day? Or, hey, can you please bring me a bagel while I'm nursing? Those are logistics. But you also should feel comfortable saying things like, hey, once a day, can you please just tell me that I'm a good mom? That would be really helpful for me to hear that, especially from you. And it's mortifying to have to ask for that kind of thing. It's like, you don't ever want to have to ask someone to walk by, to empty the dishwasher that they walk by that's full, right? But it's the same thing. As soon as you do it, you're so grateful to have that help. And it's a little bit like the generous minimum idea with how you feel and look physically. So you also realize you're the kind of person who had your stuff together enough that you could ask for the help you needed. And that ends up sort of cyclically boosting you and making you feel more confident. So expand that lesson to kind of every relationship in your life of everybody you could ask for help from. Because people want to help, they just don't know what to offer.
And I think for certain women, especially for, I would think, very type A, very corporate-minded, like go-getter, achiever, it could be hard to ask for help as well as to recognize I can't do it all. I know that I definitely fall into that category where I really do try to be like the businesswoman and the mom, and I get the costume in the bag for this and the snacks going here, and then I just get overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I'm doing too much. And I don't think I'm alone in these impossible standards. That I wonder part of it is society putting that on, is our moms putting that on themselves. So I think asking for help, while it sounds so simple, can really be really hard.
Yeah, it is. It's incredibly hard, but once it's a muscle. I mean, it is like, it's like doing yoga. Like, it gets easier every time you do it, and you find you can actually stretch a little further and you get a little stronger.
It's great advice. I'm going to try to exercise that muscle a little bit more. This has been an episode of Yoga, Birth, Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.